We're going to ask everyone to please gather behind the chairs, please. There are extra chairs available if sitting would make things easier for you today. Would not be seen as a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of wisdom. So if you need to sit, please do so.
Пожалуйста, садитесь, эти стулья для того, чтобы вы на них сидели.
We're about to begin our service. If I could ask that everyone please take a moment to turn your cell phones to their silent mode. Conducting our service today is Rabbi Michael Tillman.
Thank you. Friends, before we begin the service, we shall perform a very ancient ritual, which is called Kriya in the Hebrew language. The ritual in question dates back to the biblical period of our history. In the text of the Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, we call it in Hebrew, we find that whenever people receive sad news, including those of the passing of a loved one, they would tear their clothes and put a dust upon their head as a sign of mourning. And the custom of rending our garment when a close relative departs from this world, we retained in our community to this day. Therefore, at this time, we shall tear the ribbons given to the immediate family of the deceased. A very long time ago, to be more exact, more than 25 years ago, when I was still a young man studying at the Rabbinical Academy, I had a teacher, a professor of history, a very prominent scholar. In fact, Dr. Jacob Marcus, that was his name. He wrote the very first book on the history of the American Jews. So he single-handedly founded the entire field of the historical studies. He was a very old man. He lived to be almost to be 100 years of age. Fell a couple of weeks short of that anniversary. And I was the last class that he taught. He was 98 and a half at the time. But very sharp, very smart. And one time we had this conversation about funerals in our class. Dr. Marcus told me something that I found to be astounding at the moment. Like many young people, I perceived death rather dramatically. And Dr. Marcus shocked me with the following statement. He said, he was from West Virginia, so he had this particular way of speaking. He said, Michael, y'all better believe it. 5 minutes. 5 minutes got to be enough to say everything important about anybody. I was surprised, what do you mean, human life in 5 minutes. But when I started working as a rabbi, I realized that the old man knew what he was talking about. 5 years down the road, 5 years after that conversation, I was here in Skokie sitting with the family, right by Skokie Swift. They lost their father, 2 sons, and I quoted my professor to them. So one of the sons told me, but Rabbi, this is very sad. I said, what's so sad? He said, the whole life in 5 minutes. And I replied automatically, without even thinking about it, just came out. I said, what good is a book if you cannot tell me in 5 minutes what the book is about? Life is a book. Like any book, it has the beginning. Like any book, it has the ending. And in that book, we find everything. We find good things. We find not so good things. We find pleasant things. We find painful things. That's the nature of human existence. But when we gather together to say farewell to people whom we love and respect, it is not only about the pain of loss, which we all are feeling very sharply today, but it is also about the book of life that Mark has written for us, and that he is leaving us as his legacy. And that is not the reason to be sad, that is the reason to be proud. Because without any exaggeration, Mark lived an outstanding life. He lived a profoundly meaningful life, a wonderful life, a fruitful life. Without any exaggeration, he lived a complete life. Now the question arises, how do we write that book, because all of us, and each of us, write our own book. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon left us the following reflection, in which he discusses the nature of human existence. We're mortal human beings. We come into this world, we depart from this world, and then during that time interval allocated to us by the Almighty One here on earth, we go through everything, good and bad, profit and loss, and so on and so forth. And it's of every human being, of every person, to make sure that each experience counts, that it's meaningful, to make the best out of all of them, be they the good ones or the unpleasant ones. The words of King Solomon. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת לרדת ועת למות, עת לדעת ועת לקור נטועה, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לכבוד ועת לרחוק לדבר, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embrace. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. It is a time to speak. It is a time for us to reflect on Mark's book of life. Well, 5 minutes. How can we do it in 5 minutes? First and foremost, Mark was a brilliant man. He was not just a gifted man, a talented man, he was a brilliant man. And this is very easy to prove now. Whatever he did, whatever he pursued as his professional endeavor, he always came out great. Whatever he did, when it came to his social and political aspirations, and especially in the joint activities in my later years, always came out good. Whatever he did, it was brilliant. Now, let me start from the very beginning. Mark was born in Moscow, so I'm very proud to say that because I'm from Moscow myself. And he belongs to that generation of our people that we used to call in the old country in Russia, we used to call them Дети войны, the children of war. Moscow was never seized by the Germans, thank God, but they came pretty close. Some of the Muscovites evacuated away from the city, but some remained in the city. So Mark's family remained in there, and he remembered that time. He remembered wartime Moscow. Obviously, this was a very trying, very dramatic experience for all of us, for every family that lived in the Soviet Union, every Jewish family, and of course every family that lived in Moscow. As I said, he was a very gifted, very brilliant man, and he, having finished the high school, he attended a college. We used to call it in Russia, in our Moscow colloquial, Kerasinka. It was the Institute of Oil and Gas, named after a very famous geologist, Gubkin, so-called Gubkinsky Institute. He stayed there, and those of you who are familiar with the Soviet educational system might know that only best students would be selected to stay on and to continue their work at the college where they studied, where they graduated, and to pursue a degree. He worked there, he taught there, and it is very important to notice that he also authored a number of patents in the Soviet Union. His specialty back in the old country was oil pipelines. That was pretty much his primary specialization. Now, then came the pivotal moment in Mark's life, a radical turning point. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about his decision to bring the family to the United States. And again, it was preceded by a very tragic event. He became a widower at a very young age, and he had two young kids with him. Veronica was 4 years old at that time. And he made a decision to bring his kids to the United States, seeking better life, not so much for himself, but first and foremost for his children, for their future. In 1979, they came to America, where Mark first settled here in Chicago. Then eventually he moved to Detroit until, of course, he had, ended up back here in Chicago. Now, in Detroit, he was recruited by the Ford Corporation. And once again, remember I told you, whatever he did brilliantly. He did brilliantly when it came to his research and his work as an engineer in the oil and gas industry. But now it's a totally, well, not at all, but it's pretty much a different field. We're talking about automotive industry. And yet he came up with a number of patents, and the most famous one is, Боря, я сейчас попытаюсь это произнести. Coal extrusion process for fuel tanks. I have no idea what it means. Borya doesn't either. Yeah, we figured out the words yesterday, but neither me nor Borya. I understand it's a fuel tank. I know what it is, but what's called extrusion, yeah. But be it as it may, this was a patent that, well, almost revolutionized the entire auto industry. Ford was the first one to benefit from it due to Mark's research and introduced it into their vehicles. But then this pretty much became the standard feature in all vehicles in the automotive industry. That speaks for itself. And he received multiple awards. Some of these awards were on the television, were broadcast on the television, and plaque with Mark's name is displayed at the headquarters of the Ford Motors Corporation. I can go on and on about his accomplishments, but I think this speaks enough about his brilliance as an engineer, his brilliant mind, his tremendous, immense talent. Now, his other talent was that, again, whatever he did came out great. Because here's the thing. Many engineers usually are miserable in languages, and many humanitarians are usually pretty bad at math. So Mark was a beautiful exception out of this room. He was an excellent engineer, of course, great at sciences, and he was also wonderful at languages. Some of you might not know that back in the Soviet Union, he went ahead and learned Japanese. Believe it or not, he learned Japanese language. Not Spanish, not French, not Japanese he learned. Well, his English, it was great even in the Soviet Union. When he came over here, he didn't need to learn it. Moreover, when they were moving to the United States, back then many families went through Italy, you know that. And he stayed in Italy. He ended up working for the highest there. And the family stayed there longer than the most because the highest asked him to stay a little bit longer to help them out and to keep on working. This is how good his English was. So he was excellent. He was fantastic with languages. He knew a lot. He was a true intelligent. In the Russian culture, we have this word, intelligent, which I am reluctant to translate into the English language because in English we're going to concept of intellectual, somebody who knows a lot. Intelligent is a little bit different. Yes, it's somebody who does know a lot and who has encyclopedic knowledge, but at the same time, it also comes in conjunction with a system of values which one follows. So Mark was that kind of man. He was a true intelligent, and talking with him was always just a sheer pleasure, just a wonderful, just a great pleasure. Another thing that I want to mention is, of course, his involvement in the affairs of our society. What I mean by that is that Maya has always been active. Of course, Mark, when he was working, had less time to dedicate his efforts to the social and political activity. But later on, he also got very much involved in it. And in later years, Maya and Mark became heavily involved in the politics of the Republican Party, participated in the election as the election observers and the judges too. He was a judge too, election judge. He was also an election judge. One of the last things that Mark did, while his health still permitted, he taught seniors how to practice, how to learn, to study, to renew their driver license. Because once you reach a certain age, you have to do it every year, and it gets more and more challenging. Oh well, we all heading that way, so not me there. So he was truly, a very active, very vibrant man who lived a beautiful life. he loved everything about the world. He loved to travel. Maya and Mark got to travel a lot. They got to see many places. They got to meet a lot of interesting and famous people too. And that was really wonderful, phenomenal. Um, Mark was a man who and you know enjoyed and appreciated female beauty. That was one of the things that he enjoyed very much. He was very charming. He had this charisma. I don't know. Some guys have this talent, you know. He just smiles at you. He just extends his hand, and that's it. And the lady melts. I don't know how he does it. He did it somehow. So he was great at it. It's a gift. It's a gift. What can I tell you? And now Mark's family. I mean, he was a very accomplished man, no question about that. But family came first, and I think I already mentioned that many major decisions he made in life, he made them for the sake of his family more than anything else. He has a sister Olga, was married to Boris. He was a very loving brother. I cannot say enough what a blessing it was for Mark to meet Maya here in the United States, and they've been together for decades, for many, many years. It was a beautiful, meaningful companionship, not just love, it was a true friendship. And it was challenging. It was at times a long distance relationship too. Initially, Maya was here in Chicago, Mark was in Detroit, commuting back and forth. Tried to drive 5 hours on Friday afternoon from Chicago to Detroit, or in the opposite direction. It's fun. All the same, this was a relationship that stood the test of time, and he was a very loving husband, and he loved his children very much. His son Boris, his daughter Veronica, and Natalie. Boris is married to Alina, Veronica is married to Stuart, and Natalie is married to Jeff. He has grandchildren, Philip, Lydia, and Emma. And one of the big things in Mark's life is to make sure that his children also pursue their professional career and become professionals of advanced quality, of great qualification. He was very proud of it. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Boris, as you know, is a physician, anesthesiologist. Philip is also a physician, I think also an anesthesiologist. Veronica is an attorney, and so on and so forth. So he was very proud of that. He was truly, truly proud of it. At this time, my friends, we will continue to reflect on the beautiful book of life that Mark is living for us through the reminiscences of his son, Boris. Bora, come slow.
It's getting cold. Mark did not like when it's cold too, so the story I have is that in 1953, when Stalin died, there were Stalin's funerals in Moscow in the beginning of March. 15-year-old Mark took off from school and went to attend Stalin's funerals. Millions of people stampede. I think over 1,000 people were stampeded to death. He lost his shoes in there. He was gone from his home for over 12 hours. Grandma thought that he was dead, and she started calling the morgues. He came home 12 hours later, barefoot, cold, but alive. That was the start of his love of adventure. That was his first big travel. All the travels afterwards we did. Every year we went on an annual canoe trip in the wilderness for 4 weeks at a time. Big trip over the ocean with 2 kids in the 4 suitcases. All the travels he did, all the travels with Maya, all the places he went, all the people they met, things they've done. It's enough for 2 or maybe 3 lifetimes. Yes, he's about to go on his most important travel of a lifetime. I thought that there is a proverb, old Hebrew proverb. Don't think in grief of what he was. Let me see. How can I remember this? What would have been, but rather what he was. And with that, I want to wish him his happy journey until we meet again.
Friends, let us honor Mark's memory with a moment of silence. Please rise in the memorial prayers we follow. Сидите. Вы не обязательно можете вставать. С нами Бог, не там в шатре лазурном, не за пределами бесчисленных миров, не в злом огне и не в дыхании бурном, и не в уснувшей памяти веков. Он здесь теперь, средь суеты случайной, в потоке шумном жизненных тревог. Владеешь ты всерадостную тайной, бессильно зло, но вечно с нами Бог. אל מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים, אמצע מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכנה, במעלות קדושים ותורים כזהר הרקיעים האסירים. את נשמת מלך שהלך לעולמו, בעל הרחמים יסתרג בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וצור בצור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוס בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. God full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of our beloved Mother. The Master of mercy will protect him forever, and will bind his soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance, may he rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen. And finally, my friends, we shall say Kaddish. And we all know that we say Kaddish in memory of people whom we love, but whom unfortunately lost. But I'd like to stress again, Kaddish is not about death. Kaddish is a hymn of praise to God. And therefore it is a hymn of praise to life itself. So here and now we shall honor Mark's life. We shall honor the book of life that he is leaving for us as his legacy with the sacred words of our ancient prayer. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. Bi'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei. וחיי יכונו ויום יכונו וחיי דכל בית ישראל והגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהיה שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי יתקודשה ברכו לעילם עם כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונקמתה דאמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יש להם רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us. Amen. In just a few moments, our friends will close the lid of the vault, and then everyone will have an opportunity to take part. You may be seated. To take part in the burial. And that is the most important aspect of the funeral rites in Judaism, that everyone takes part in the burial of the deceased. In the meantime, this earth is taken from the place called Har Zaytim, Mount of Olives, which is located in Jerusalem. What's the significance of this earth? Well, in our tradition, it is deemed to be very important to be buried in the land of Israel. And the reason is that in the rabbinical literature, in many sources, for example, Midrash Tanhuma, just one of them, we find this idea that when the end of times will come and when the Messiah will arrive, the Mashiach, there will be a resurrection of the dead. And people who are buried in the land of Israel will be the first ones to return back to life. So to symbolize burial in the land of Israel, we will place this earth into the place of eternal rest of our dear. In just a few moments, we will continue with the burial, and when you'll be taking part in the ritual, I certainly would like to remind you that be very careful. It's quite a bit slippery. Watch your step. We don't want any unpleasant and unforeseen incidents to occur. It will just take a few minutes. I will announce when we should be prepared to proceed.
weren't in the frame. If you weren't in the frame, you're fine.
Сейчас просто еще сейчас позвоню, а потом запишу. Я уже вызвал. Это не важно. Он же звонок. Friends, we are now prepared to proceed. We shall begin with the immediate family, and then everyone please do take part in the prayer. Again, be very careful approaching the grave. You may use your hands if you want to do it the way we did it, used to do it in Russia, or you can use a shovel that is also available. Please come just from one side, from the left side, please. Как только используете руку, я вам рекомендую в машину вернуться.
So when things settle down, so we will have the order to celebrate his name. Thank you.
Pardon?
Morris.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome.